Hello, my dear students, third year students. Our lecture today is entitled The Direct Method. Previously, we have studied the grammar translation method and we have explained the most important ideas related to this method, starting from the experience, observations, and the principles, reviewing the principles, and reviewing the techniques. The last point that we have mentioned, according to the grammar translation method, was the drawbacks of the grammar translation method. We have identified the weaknesses of the grammar translation method. That's why we have the introduction of a new method known as the direct method. Let us consider the most important points in the direct method. The direct method was the product of a reform movement which was reacting to the restrictions of the grammar translation method. It was considered vitally important that only the target language should be used in the classroom. So, the first point of criticism to the grammar translation method that is the use of a native language as a language of instruction. That's why we have the appearance of a reform movement which rejects completely the use of native language in the classroom, and they emphasize that the language of instruction is the target language. The reformers believed that spoken language is primary, so we should not ignore the oral form of language. We should emphasize spoken language in the same way as we emphasize written language. Learners should hear the target language first before seeing it in written form. So, according to the reform movement, the learners should be introduced with the language orally first and then they learn the written form of the language. Words should be presented in sentences, and sentences should be practiced in meaningful context and not be taught as isolated elements, of course, as it is done in the grammar translation method. In grammar translation method, they introduce sentences with, and the vocabulary items with individual sentences, isolated sentences without referring to the context. But according to the direct method or according to the reformers who rejected the grammar translation method, the words are supposed to be set with sentences and in meaningful context. Rules of grammar should be taught only after the students have practiced the grammar points in context. That the grammar should be taught inductively, which is the opposite to the situation of introducing the grammatical structure according to the grammar translation method, in which it is used deductively. First, the students start with the grammatical rules and then apply the grammatical rules to examples. So reformers rejected this and they mentioned that the students are supposed first to start with examples and then to understand the examples to understand the grammatical rules from the examples. And translation should be avoided. It is not a very successful technique in learning a foreign language. That's why the students should use other techniques than translation. Now we start with the main principles of the direct method. Number one, classroom instruction was conducted exclusively in the target language. So, it is very important that the target language is used in the classroom when the teacher interacts with the students or when the teacher directs the students' activity inside the classroom. Only everyday vocabulary and sentences were taught. The focus upon vocabulary items, only vocabulary items which are important for everyday interaction between teacher and the students. Grammar was taught inductively, in which the teacher starts with giving the students examples and then the students understand the rules from the examples. New teaching points were introduced orally. According to the direct method, the emphasis should be on oral skills and that the students are supposed to learn the new teaching material orally and then they learn the written form of the teaching material. Both speech and listening comprehension were taught. It's very important to enable the students to speak and listen, which is the same as the emphasis upon oral skills. Correct pronunciation and the grammar were emphasized. As we have observed, according to the grammar translation method, pronunciation is not given any emphasis. So, according to the grammar translation method, since oral production is emphasized, since communication using the target language is emphasized, in this case, the teacher emphasizes pronunciation. Concrete vocabulary was taught through demonstration, objects, and pictures. Abstract vocabulary was taught by association of ideas. So, the teacher introduces the meaning of vocabulary items by direct association between objects and concepts on one hand and words on the other hand. We have two types of vocabulary items concrete vocabulary items that refer to objects that the students can observe, like chair, door, window, etc. So, such vocabulary items can be referred to by making use of the furniture of the classroom, or the teacher can demonstrate certain actions to explain the meaning of certain words. Sometimes we have vocabulary items that refer to abstract ideas like feelings. So, in this case, the teacher makes use of association of ideas. He connects the students' ideas, what the students know, with the new ideas, and he makes use of the connection between ideas. Introduction. The direct method is not new, its principles have been applied by language teachers for many years. Most recently, it was received as a method when the goal of instruction became learning how to use another language to communicate. So, this is the first step in which the students are supposed to use the language in a spoken form as well as in a written form. In this case, it's very important to make the instructions in the target language and to avoid the use of the native language in the classroom. Since the grammar translation method was not very effective in preparing the students to use the target language communicatively, because the teacher emphasizes only learning the written form or the student's ability to read and write and translate literary passages from the target language to the native language without any emphasis to the spoken form of language. So in this case, the direct method became popular. In this case, we have the rejection of the grammar translation method because the students cannot communicate using the target language and the introduction of the direct method. The direct method has one very basic rule: no translation is allowed. So, the students are not supposed to translate the passages or the meaning of words from the target language to the native language. They should explain the meaning of words using the target language by expressing or by providing the meaning of the word in the target language. The direct method receives its name from the fact that meaning is to be conveyed directly in the target language through the use of demonstration and visual aids with no recourse to the student's native language. According to the target language, the student's native language is not allowed to be used in the class by the teacher or by students. In this case, the teacher cannot use the native language to explain the meaning of words. That's why the teacher should use demonstration, visual aids, The teacher uses pictures provided in the text, brings objects, any idea that helps the students to understand the meaning of the vocabulary items and the target language without use of the native language. Now let us consider the experience. The teacher is calling the class to order as we find seats towards the back of the room. He has placed a big map of the USA in front of the classroom. The first idea that we observe is that the teacher uses a big map. This map is used as a visual aid by the teacher to help the students to understand the content of the reading passage, which was about the geography of the United States. He asked the students to open their books to a certain page number. The lesson is entitled Looking at a Map. As the students are called on one by one, they read a sentence from the reading passage at the beginning of the lesson. The teacher points to the part of the map the sentence describes after each has read a sentence. So the passage begins. In this case, the teacher asks the students to read. Students' reading should be associated with the parts of the map available in front of the students. So that's why we call it the direct method, because it depends upon a direct association between words studied and the take the, let us say, visual aids, pictures, objects, anything which is available to explain the meaning of words. After the students finish reading the passage, they are asked if they have any questions. As students ask what a mountain range is. As you see, the question is asked in English, which is the target language. English here is a target language. It is not the student's native language. The teacher turns to the whiteboard and draws a series of inverted cones to illustrate a mountain range. The students nod and says, I understand. So the teacher uses drawing on the board in order to help the students to understand the meaning of the word mountain range. When the students understand, he uses the target language to express this by saying, I understand. Another student asks what between means. The teacher replies, you are sitting between Maria Pia and Giovanni. So in this case, the teacher is using the situation in which the students are sitting to express or to explain the meaning of the word between. But the native language is not used in the classroom, so the teacher should use any idea to help the students to understand the meaning of a particular vocabulary item without using the native language. After all the questions have been answered, the teacher asks some of his own. The teacher asks the students certain questions. Class, are we looking at a map of Italy? The class replies in chorus, which means whole class, no. The teacher remains the class to answer in full sentences. No, we aren't looking at a map of Italy. They respond. So in this case, the teacher wants the students to use the target language for communication, and they should use new words in complete sentences and in meaningful context. That's why he asked them to reply in complete sentences. The question and answer session continues for a few minutes. Finally, the teacher invites the students to ask questions. Hands go up, and the teacher calls on the students to pose questions one at a time, to which the class replies. So one student asks a question and the class replies to this question. After several questions have been posed, one girl asks, where are the Appalachian Mountains? Before the class has chance to respond, the teacher works with the students on the pronunciation of appellation. In this case, the teacher emphasizes the importance of correct pronunciation. That's why when the teacher feels that this word is difficult for the students to pronounce, he tries to help them by repeating the pronunciation of the word and asking the students to repeat till they have the correct pronunciation of this word, because oral production is very important according to the direct method. Then he includes the rest of the class in this practice as well, expecting that they will have the same problem with this long word. After ensuring that the student's pronunciation is correct, the teacher allows the class to answer the question. So it's important to have the correct pronunciation of words. After the students have asked about 10 questions, the teacher begins asking questions and making statements again. This time, the questions and the statements are about the students in the classroom and contain one of the prepositions on, at, to, in, or between. So in this case, the teacher asks the students to practice prepositions. The teacher next instructs the students to turn to an exercise in the lesson which asks them to fill in the blanks. They read a sentence out loud and supply the missing word as they are reading. For example, the Atlantic Ocean is the east coast. Here we have the technique of filling in blanks. This technique is used to practice the use of prepositions, which means the practice of grammatical structures. Now we have thinking about the experience, which includes observations and principles. Let us consider the first observation. The students read aloud a passage about the geography of the United States of America. Reading in the target language should be taught from the beginning of language instruction. In this case, reading is important. Reading is not ignored, but the priority is given to oral skills. That's why we say that reading skills will be developed through practice with speaking. Language is primarily speech. So in this case, the most important idea or the most important skill is oral language. At the same time, written language is emphasized and not ignored. So all skills are emphasized according to the direct method with more emphasis given to oral skills. Culture consists of more than fine arts. In the lesson, we observed the students studying geography and cultural attitudes. So, the students' knowledge about the culture of the target language is gained from the text studied by the students, and it is not consisting of fine arts or literary works as it is in the grammar translation method. Two, the teacher points to a part of the map after each sentence is read. Objects, realia, or pictures present in the immediate classroom environment should be used to help the students understand meaning. We mentioned that we teach according to direct association between meaning and words on one hand and objects on the other hand and ideas. So in this case, the teacher makes use of the classroom environment or visual aids available or sometimes pictures available in the textbook to help the students to understand the content of the activity. The teacher uses the target language to ask the students if they have a question. The students use the target language to ask their questions. The native language should not be used in the classroom. We mentioned that the aim is to help the students to speak or to communicate using the target language. That's why the medium of instruction or the language which is used in the classroom by the teacher and the students is the target language. The teacher answers the students' questions by drawing on the whiteboard or giving examples. The teacher should demonstrate, not explain or translate. It is desirable that students make a direct association between target language from form and meaning. So in this case, since we depend on the association between the target language and the ideas available in the class, the teacher uses the whiteboard to explain the meaning of certain words. The teacher asks questions about the map in the target language, to which the students reply in a complete sentence in the target language. Students should learn to think in the target language as soon as possible. Vocabulary is acquired more naturally if students use it in full sentences rather than memorizing word lists, as the situation in the grammar translation approach where students memorize lists of vocabulary items with their native equivalents. So the teacher asks the students to use words in full sentences in order to uh, acquire them more naturally. Students ask questions about the map. The purpose of language learning is communication. Therefore, students need to learn how to ask questions as well as answer them. And it is the idea of practicing to communicate in the target language. That's why the students ask questions and the questions are answered in the target language. The teacher works with the students on the pronunciation of appellation. We mentioned that the teacher emphasizes the idea of a pronunciation because it is important to produce, or the aim is to develop students' ability to communicate in the target language. So the pronunciation should be worked out from the beginning of language instruction. The teacher corrects a grammar error by asking the students to make a choice. Self-correction facilitates language learning. Here we have a very important idea, which is the technique used for correction students' errors according to direct method. In the direct method, the teacher stops and he asks the students who produces an error. He provides choices. One of them is the correct answer, and he helps the students to choose the correct answer. This technique is known as self-correction technique, which is used to correct the students' errors according to the direct method. The teacher asks questions about the students, and the students ask each other questions. Lessons should contain some conversational activity, some opportunity for students to use language in real context. Students should be encouraged to speak as much as possible. So since the aim is to be able to use the target language to communicate, that's why the students are supposed to ask questions and answer the questions in the target language. The students fill in blanks with the prepositions practiced in the lesson. Grammar should be taught inductively, which is the opposite to the way in which it is introduced in the grammar translation method. There may never be an explicit grammar rule given. The students are supposed to understand the rules from examples given by the teacher. The teacher dictates a paragraph about the United States geography. Writing is an important skill to be developed from the beginning of the language and instruction. So we mentioned that reading and writing are important, but the priority is given to spoken language. At the same time, the students should practice writing. That's why we have the technique used by the teacher. This technique is known as dictation. All of the lessons of the week involve the United States geography. The syllabus is based on situations or topics, not usually on linguistic structures. This is important because here the aim is to learn the content, to learn the in a meaningful situation. That's why the lessons are connected in relation to content. The meaning of the ideas expressed in the lesson is connected. A proverb is used to discuss how Americans view punctuality. So in this case, the teacher explains a proverb. This proverb is used by the teacher to explain the way in which people who use the target language think. So they think about punctuality and the extent to which it's important to be or to have punctuality in all our, let us say, aspects of our life. That's why the students can understand something about the culture of the target language for people who live in the American United States. Thank you very much. That's all for today, and we will go on in our coming lecture and explanation of the grammar translation, of the direct method. Thank you.